picture this. You are like right in the middle of a conversation and someone asks you a question.
Oh, I know exactly where this is going.
Right. You know exactly what you want to say. The thought is right there in your head, crystal clear. But before you can actually open your mouth and speak, this whole hidden process has to happen.
The dreaded internal translation.
Exactly. First, you think of the perfect response in your native language.
Yeah.
Then, you mentally drag that sentence over to your internal dictionary, and you start translating it word by word into English.
You're checking the grammar, you're rearranging verbs.
Yeah, you finally get the English sentence lined up perfectly in your mind. You
Yeah.
take a breath, you open your mouth to deliver this masterpiece of a sentence, and the conversation has already moved on.
They're talking about something else entirely.
The person you were talking to is on to the next topic. You missed your window completely.
It's the worst feeling.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. If you have ever felt that exact paralyzing frustration, you are definitely not alone. Today, we are tearing down the mechanics of the bilingual brain to figure out how to completely bypass that internal translation stage.
We want to train your brain to think directly in English.
Right, and eliminate that hesitation for good. Because the goal of this deep dive isn't just to throw more vocabulary at you.
No, not at all.
It's about fundamentally changing the internal mechanics of how you process the language. So let's just get right into it. Why is this such a universal bottleneck for people?
Well, it really is the universal bottleneck. You see, learners have the vocabulary, right? They understand the concepts, but the sheer mechanical process of translating inside your own head, it acts like this massive cognitive speed bump.
A speed bump. I like that.
Yeah, because we often talk about fluency as if it's just, a matter of learning more words.
Like cramming a dictionary into your head.
Exactly. But the reality is that fluency is actually a mechanical issue. It's about processing speed and cognitive load.
Okay, I want to look at this. Like, think of a computer trying to watch a high-definition video on a terrible internet connection.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, because you have all the data. The video file exists on the server. But the processing lag, that spinning wheel of death on the screen, makes the actual real-time experience completely impossible to enjoy.
You're just constantly buffering.
Yes, you're constantly buffering in conversation.
And buffering is really the perfect way to visualize what we call the three-step trap. Let's look at the actual neurological mechanics of what is happening when you do that.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So, step one, your brain generates a thought in your native language.
Natural enough.
Right. Step two, your working memory activates. It's holding that native sentence while simultaneously searching your long-term memory for the English equivalents.
Wow, okay.
And then it's applying grammatical rules to arrange those words. Finally, step three, your motor cortex signals your mouth to physically articulate the sounds.
And the problem is, real life doesn't wait for step two.
It absolutely doesn't. Real conversations are dynamic, they're unpredictable, they flow at a very specific rhythm.
People aren't just standing there patiently while your brain loads.
Exactly. Human beings are biologically wired to expect a response within about 200 milliseconds in a natural conversation.
Wait, 200 milliseconds? That's a fraction of a second.
It's basically instantaneous. If your brain is bogged down in step two, you're going to blow right past that 200 millisecond window.
So that mental heavy lifting is exactly what creates the visible hesitation. The blank stares, the awkward pauses, the lag.
Yes. Contrast that with fluent speakers. They aren't just like running a faster internal translation algorithm.
They aren't just better at step two.
No, they just aren't translating at all. They completely bypass steps 1 and 2. They have an abstract idea or a feeling, and they connect that raw data directly to the English words.
Okay, give me an example of that direct connection.
So if a fluent speaker accidentally touches a hot stove, they do not think, oh, this is hot in their native language, run it through a translation matrix, and then say, ouch, in English.
Right, that would take way too long.
The physical sensation of heat connects instantly to the English expression. There is a direct neural pathway.
Okay, let me stop you there, though, and ask a foundational question. If translating in our heads is so detrimental to speaking naturally, and it obviously causes this massive cognitive buffering delay, why is it our default?
That's a great question.
I mean, why does it feel so helpful, almost necessary, when we first start learning a language? It's how every language class is taught, right? At what exact point does this helpful crutch become a trap?
Well, it's the default because on day one, it's literally the only cognitive architecture you have available.
What do you mean by that?
When you first encounter a new language, you have absolutely no framework for it. Your brain essentially treats the new language as just a series of meaningless sound waves.
It's just noise.
Exactly. So to make sense of it, your brain has to map the new English words onto the existing neural networks of your native language.
Ah, so apple maps directly to your native word for apple.
Precisely. It's a one-to-one declarative mapping. You are essentially memorizing a fact.
Right, which gives you a sense of safety. You're tethering the unknown to the known.
Yes, but that crutch becomes a trap the absolute second you try to participate in a real-time, spontaneous conversation.
Because of the speed.
Because of the speed and because you start running up against the hard biological limits of your working memory. Cognitive psychology shows us that the human working memory can only hold about 4 to 7 chunks of information at any given time.
Only 4 to 7. That's not much at all.
It's tiny. So as your vocabulary grows and the sentences you want to say become more complex, that one-to-one mapping system just crashes.
Like a computer running out of RAM.
Literally. Your working memory simply cannot hold a long native sentence, run a real-time translation algorithm, monitor the other person's facial expressions, and plan your next thought all at the same exact time. You run out of mental RAM.
So the system completely overloads and you freeze.
It overloads and you freeze. And that is the exact point where you have to fundamentally change your approach. You have to stop treating language like a math problem to be decoded and start treating it like a direct reflex.
Okay, so the translation crutch absolutely has to go. We have to start thinking in English. But the moment you tell a learner that, there's usually this immediate wave of panic.
Oh, totally. People freak out.
Because there's this massive myth about what thinking in a new language actually entails.
Yeah. People falsely believe that thinking in English requires advanced vocabulary, complex grammatical structures, and just this profound intellectual depth.
They imagine that to truly think in English, they need to be silently narrating a philosophical debate in their heads.
Or drafting an academic essay while walking down the street.
Which is terrifying. I mean, I don't even do that in my native language most of the time.
Right.
My internal monologue is mostly just an endless loop of what I want for lunch or a song stuck in my head.
Exactly. And because learners think they need to generate these highly complex, eloquent thoughts, they feel completely unqualified to even attempt it.
They think they aren't ready.
But the reality is entirely different. Thinking in English begins with incredibly basic, almost primal thoughts.
Like what?
We are talking about the simplest possible ideas, like, I'm tired, or I'm hungry.
That looks interesting.
Yeah, or I need coffee.
But wait, if I'm just walking around my apartment thinking I'm tired, am I really learning anything? To a learner, that feels like cheating.
I get that.
It feels like you aren't doing the hard work of language acquisition. How is thinking a two-word sentence actually helping my brain?
Because the goal at this stage is not vocabulary expansion. The goal is neurological rewiring.
Okay, unpack that for me.
We need to distinguish between declarative memory and procedural memory. Declarative memory is knowing a fact, like knowing that the word for tired is tired. Procedural memory is knowing how to perform an action automatically.
Like riding a bike or tying your shoe.
Exactly. You are trying to shift language from a fact you recall to an action you perform.
I want to bring back an analogy here like weightlifting, but let's take it a step further.
Let's hear it.
Learners think they need to walk into the gym on day one and bench press a 50-pound dictionary. They want to lift the heaviest, most complex sentences right out of the gate.
Which is a recipe for failure.
Right. But thinking I'm tired is like lifting a 1-pound weight. It feels ridiculously light. But you aren't trying to build massive muscle yet. You are training the central nervous system to understand the motion.
That is a brilliant way to put it. You are training the specific, delicate neurological motion of completely bypassing your native language.
Because if you try to lift a heavy, complex thought too early,
your brain will panic, drop the weight, and immediately fall back into the super fast pathway of your native language to handle the load.
and that just reinforces the translation habit all over again.
Exactly. That is precisely what is happening biologically. When you feel exhaustion in your body and you force your brain to immediately produce the English word tired without your native language stepping in first, you are triggering a process called myelination.
Myelination. Okay, what is that?
Myelin is this fatty tissue that wraps around neural pathways in your brain. The more you use a specific pathway in this case, the direct link from the physical feeling of being tired to the English word, the thicker that myelin sheath becomes.
So it insulates the wire, basically.
Yes, and a heavily myelinated pathway can transmit signals up to 100 times faster than an unmyelinated one.
100 times faster. Wow. So by keeping the weight incredibly light, just one or two simple words, you allow the brain to successfully complete the motion entirely in English, which thickens that myelin sheath.
You're greasing the groove, so yes, you must start with the 1-pound weights.
Okay, so if the thoughts we need to practice are this simple, where's the best place for the listener to actually find them?
Well, you don't need a textbook.
Right. You don't need a flashcard app. The curriculum is literally just your physical reality.
Mhm.
Let's talk about environmental anchoring.
I love this concept. Your daily life is the ultimate language lab. Because your day is already filled with hundreds of mundane, repetitive actions, you have a built-in framework for practice.
So how do we use it?
The primary technique here is action narration. As you move through your day, you describe your own small actions in English as you are doing them.
So, like, I'm brushing my teeth.
Yes, I'm making breakfast, I'm opening my laptop, I'm turning on the shower.
Hold on, let me play devil's advocate here. If I'm stressed at work, I'm trying to meet a deadline, or I'm just trying to get my kids out the door in the morning, the absolute last thing my brain wants to do is actively narrate my chaos in a second language.
Oh, absolutely not. That sounds exhausting.
How do you bypass the sheer exhaustion of trying to do this all day long?
Well, the secret is you don't do it all day. That would lead to massive cognitive fatigue. Nobody can sustain that.
So when do you do it?
You attach this practice to what behavioral psychologists call habit stacking.
Habit stacking. I've heard of that.
Yeah, you take an action you already do on autopilot, something that requires almost zero cognitive load, like making your morning coffee or taking a shower.
Things you could do in your sleep.
Exactly. And you stack the action narration on top of it. You are taking advantage of a brain state where your working memory is mostly empty anyway.
Okay, let's drill down into why this specific pairing works. What is the psychology of connecting the act of brushing your teeth to the English phrase?
It relies on a really fascinating concept called embodied cognition. Our brains do not process language in a vacuum.
Right.
They process it in relation to our physical bodies and our environment. By connecting a kinetic action like the physical sensation of the toothbrush in your hand, the taste of the mint toothpaste directly to the English phrase brushing my teeth, you are creating a multisensory anchor.
You're tying the word to the physical feeling.
Yes. Your motor cortex, which controls your hand, is firing at the exact same time as Broca's area, which controls language production.
You are linking the physical reality to the English vocabulary in real time. And because the action and the words are happening simultaneously, there is no time gap for the native language to sneak in.
Precisely. There's no room for translation. And the second half of this environmental anchoring is visual description.
Okay, so action narration is what you're doing. What is visual description?
Visual description is about what you are seeing. You look around the room you're currently sitting in, and you simply label reality.
There's a window.
My desk is messy.
The weather looks nice today.
The coffee mug is blue.
Exactly.
So you are creating a closed-loop system. The visual stimulus hits your retina, travels through your optic nerve to your visual cortex. You see the messy papers on your desk. Instantly, you force the brain to produce the English word messy. Again, no middleman. No middleman. And if we step back and look at the broader implication of this, you are doing something really profound. You are training your brain to view the world through an English lens.
Which changes everything.
It does. You are proving to your nervous system that English isn't just an abstract subject you study in a textbook. It is a valid functional tool for interacting with the physical reality around you.
I have to ask a practical question, though, because I know people listening are wondering this right now.
Sure.
Is the goal to do this out loud? Am I supposed to be walking around my apartment like a sports commentator, narrating my own morning?
Play-by-play of making toast.
Right. And he's opening the fridge, he's reaching for the milk. It's a spectacular pour. Or should this all just be an internal monologue?
Well, doing it as a silent internal monologue is highly effective because it directly trains the inner voice, which is the core of thinking in a language. However, if you are alone in your apartment, doing it out loud is a massive force multiplier.
Why is that?
Yeah.
What does speaking it aloud actually add to the process?
It adds proprioceptive feedback.
Proprioceptive feedback.
Yeah, when you speak aloud, you are forcing your facial muscles, your tongue, and your vocal cords to physically form the sounds.
So it's muscle memory.
Yes. Your brain receives physical feedback from those muscles and auditory feedback from your own ears hearing the words. You are activating multiple neural pathways simultaneously, which cements the memory far deeper than just thinking it silently.
That makes total sense.
But obviously, use common sense. If you are on a crowded subway, keep it as an internal monologue. Silently thinking, the man next to me is sleeping, is great practice. Saying it out loud is a social violation.
Yeah, please don't do that on the subway.
Yeah.
Fair point.
Okay.
Okay, so we know where to find the vocabulary. It's in our environment, our daily actions, our messy desk.
Right.
But we have to address how to string those words together without getting completely overwhelmed. Because the moment you ask a learner to actually put words together, their brain immediately tries to write a novel.
It's true, and this is a critical pivot point in building the architecture of fluency. The golden rule here is the absolute necessity of using short sentences.
I like this.
That sounds good. I need coffee. This stands in direct opposition to the adult learner's deepest instinct, which is to construct long, complex, heavily modified sentences.
Let's unpack the psychology behind that instinct for a second. Why do we always try to make it so complicated? Why is it so hard for adults to just say, the coffee is hot?
Well, because as adults, we possess intellectual maturity. We are used to expressing highly complex, nuanced, sophisticated thoughts in our native language.
We want to sound smart.
Exactly. We want our English output to accurately reflect our internal intelligence. When an adult is reduced to saying the coffee is hot, they feel vulnerable. They feel like they sound infantile.
Right. It hurts the ego.
So to protect their ego, they try to force a complex syntactic structure. They try to say, the coffee, which I purchased earlier this morning from the local cafe, possesses a thermal temperature that is slightly higher than I would prefer.
And right in the middle of that relative clause, the brain just short circuits.
It completely shuts down. We call this cognitive overload. Trying to build long sentences in a language you are still mastering creates immense pressure. You are juggling vocabulary retrieval, verb conjugations, prepositions, and syntactic branching all at once.
And that pressure inevitably leads to hesitation.
Hesitation, stumbling, and ultimately a total loss of confidence. Short sentences, on the other hand, relieve that cognitive load entirely.
Because there's less to manage.
Right. They are faster to process, they are easier to articulate, and most importantly, they guarantee a win.
A win. I like that.
You say, I need coffee. You say it correctly, you are understood, and you build immediate real-time momentum.
Okay, I'm going to push back here on behalf of the listener.
Go for it.
If I'm a professional, say I'm walking into a business meeting or a job interview, and I only speak in tiny three-word sentences like, I need coffee, I am busy, or this is bad, I'm going to lose my job. Won't I sound robotic or incompetent to native speakers? How does this actually work in the real world?
That is a very, very common fear. But it's actually based on a complete misunderstanding of how native speakers converse.
Really?
Yeah, if you analyze transcriptions of unscripted, spontaneous native speech, you will find that native speakers do not speak in perfectly formed, complex paragraphs.
We really don't.
We speak in quick, rhythmic bursts. We use highly fragmented syntax, filler words, and short, punchy clauses.
So we are judging ourselves against a standard of written English, not spoken English.
Exactly. You are holding yourself to the standard of an edited essay, which no one actually speaks like. Furthermore, we have to look at the pragmatic function of language. In linguistics, there is a concept called Grice's maxims.
Grice's maxims, what are those?
They essentially state that effective communication should be as informative, true, relevant, and clear as possible. Clarity is the ultimate goal.
Clarity over complexity.
Always. If you try to build a complex sentence to sound smart, but you stumble, hesitate for 10 seconds, and then tangle the grammar, the communication fails. The listener is confused.
But if you use crisp, clear, perfectly delivered short sentence,
the communication succeeds flawlessly. Fluency isn't about grammatical complexity. It is about the frictionless transfer of an idea from your brain to someone else's.
the frictionless transfer of an idea. That is perfectly said. That is exactly what we're aiming for.
Right.
But to get there, we have to talk about self-questioning. Aside from just narrating what you see, the sources mentioned asking yourself things like, what am I doing now? Or what should I eat today? And then answering in English. Why is the question format specifically useful?
Questions act as a neurological trigger. A question activates what is known as the reticular activating system in your brain.
Okay, so it forces attention.
Yes, human beings are biologically wired to seek closure. When we hear a question, our brain automatically begins searching for an answer.
Even if we ask the question to ourselves.
Even then, when you ask yourself, what am I doing now? You are artificially simulating the exact pressure of a real conversation, but entirely within the safety of your own mind.
Well, that's clever. It's like a fire drill for your brain.
Exactly. It prompts your brain to generate an English response on demand rather than just passively observing your environment. It turns passive narration into an active, dynamic dialogue with yourself.
And all of this, the worry about sounding infantile, the hesitation, the overcomplicating it all, leads us directly into what is arguably the biggest, most paralyzing emotional roadblock that every learner faces.
Oh, without a doubt.
The fear of making a mistake,
Ugh.
the desire for perfection.
Perfectionism is the absolute enemy of fluency. The biggest mistake learners make is delaying their speech, hesitating, or just staying completely silent because they are terrified of making a grammatical error.
They want to construct the perfect sentence before they even open their mouths.
Which, as we've discussed, means the moment passes.
Let's talk about Stephen Krashen's effective filter hypothesis, because I think it perfectly explains the biology of why this fear is so destructive.
Yes, Krashen's work is foundational here. The effective filter hypothesis posits that negative emotional variables like anxiety, self-doubt, and the fear of embarrassment create a literal cognitive block.
A physical block in the brain.
When you are terrified of making a mistake, your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, activates. It floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline.
Fight or flight mode.
Right. And the stress response literally blocks your prefrontal cortex from accessing the language acquisition and memory centers of your brain.
That is wild.
You aren't just nervous, you are biologically locked out of your own vocabulary.
It's a completely backward way of looking at skill acquisition. It's like refusing to play a song on the piano unless you can guarantee you will play it flawlessly with perfect tempo on the very first try.
That's not how learning works at all.
You have to sit down, you have to hit a bunch of wrong notes, you have to sound clunky and terrible to figure out the rhythm and build the muscle memory.
To stretch that piano analogy, spontaneous conversation isn't about reading sheet music perfectly, it's about playing jazz.
Ooh, I love that. It's improvisation.
Exactly. Fluency does not grow from flawless grammar, it grows from the momentum of practice. When you are agonizing in your head over whether to use the present perfect or the past simple, you are pausing the momentum. You are buffering again.
So what's the shift in mindset?
When you shift your primary goal from being perfectly grammatically correct to simply successfully communicating an idea, the hesitation vanishes, the effective filter lowers, and your brain can actually access the words you know.
And let's be honest, native speakers make mistakes constantly.
We do it all day long.
Seriously?
Native speakers dangle modifiers. We use the wrong tense in fast speech. We lose our train of thought. We start sentences and just abandon them halfway through.
All the time. But the communication still works perfectly fine because the context carries the meaning.
Exactly. In linguistics, we differentiate between grammatical competence and communicative competence.
What's the difference?
Well, if you say, yesterday I go to store, your grammatical competence has failed. The tense is wrong. But does the listener know exactly what you mean?
Of course. You went to the store.
Yes. Your communicative competence succeeded perfectly. You transferred the idea. The learner must accept their own imperfect English as a necessary, completely normal, functional stage of the journey.
So getting over that mental hurdle, dropping the perfectionism, lowering the effective filter, accepting that you will hit wrong notes on the piano, that is step one.
Huge step one.
But to actually rewire the brain to think directly in English, dropping the fear isn't enough. You need a sustainable system.
You need to put in the reps.
Right. You need to actually put the reps in to build that myelin we talked about earlier. Which brings us to the mechanics of daily habit.
The required routine is surprisingly achievable, but it does require a fundamental shift in how we view studying.
Because we aren't talking about locking yourself in a library with a grammar workbook for 3 hours.
No, please don't do that. We are talking about daily, integrated practice, even if it is just for 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Honestly, that sounds a little gimmicky to a lot of people.
I know it does.
How does 5 minutes of muttering to myself about my coffee actually move the needle on fluency, more than sitting down and rigorously studying for 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon?
It comes down to how the brain builds, reinforces, and prunes neural pathways. When you cram for 3 hours on a Sunday, you drastically overload your working memory.
Aye.
You might memorize a lot of vocabulary in that session, but the brain views that massive influx of data as an isolated stress event.
Interesting.
Because you don't use that information on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, a biological process called synaptic pruning occurs.
The synaptic pruning, it cuts the connections.
Exactly. While you sleep, the brain literally clears out neural connections that it deems unnecessary for daily survival. It prunes away the vocabulary you just spent 3 hours studying.
Wow. But if I do 5 minutes every single day,
If you practice for 5 minutes every single day, you are providing frequent, low-stakes exposure.
Yep.
You're constantly tapping that specific neural pathway. You are demonstrating a pattern to your nervous system.
telling it, hey, I need this.
Yes. The brain recognizes this frequency and operates on Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Fire together, wire together.
The brain says, oh, we are using this English pathway every single day to navigate our morning routine. This must be a vital tool for our environment. Let's make this pathway stronger. Let's add myelin. Let's make it automatic.
So consistency signals biological importance.
Yeah.
Cramming just signals temporary stress.
You nailed it.
Okay, here's a highly practical scenario for you. Let's say someone listening to this right now only has exactly 10 spare minutes a day to dedicate to this. That's it. 10 minutes total between work, kids, commuting, and life.
Okay, a very real scenario.
What is the better return on investment for those 10 minutes? Should they actively try to narrate their room and force the English output? Or should they passively listen to an English podcast to absorb those natural patterns?
That is a tough constraint, but it really highlights the relationship between input and output. If forced to choose, you need a combination. But comprehensible input is the foundational fuel.
Meaning you have to hear it first?
You cannot output what you have not inputted. Listening feeds your brain the raw data it needs to start thinking in those patterns.
So listening to a podcast isn't just passive.
Not at all. When you listen to natural conversational English like a podcast, you aren't just hearing words. Your brain is utilizing mirror neurons to silently map the rhythm, the intonation, the stress patterns, and the common short phrases native speakers use.
You are training the ear?
You are training the brain's phonological loop.
So if you only narrate your environment without listening to native speakers, what happens?
Well, you might just be hardwiring your own unnatural phrasing.
Ah, so you're perfectly reinforcing mistakes.
Exactly. You might be perfectly reinforcing a very awkward way of speaking. So in a 10-minute window, I would say spend 7 minutes actively listening to train the ear and feed the subconscious, and 3 minutes actively narrating your environment to train the mouth and forge the direct conscious link.
7 minutes listening, 3 minutes speaking. That makes perfect sense. The listening provides the architectural blueprint. The narration is the actual construction work.
That's a great way to summarize it.
And all of this, the daily input, the short sentence output, the rejection of perfectionism, the environmental anchoring, the habit stacking, it all builds towards something.
It does.
It isn't just an endless incremental grind. It builds toward a singular transformative moment for the learner.
We call this the tipping point of automation.
The tipping point.
We have to be honest and acknowledge that language learning takes time, and day to day, the progress can feel incredibly slow, almost invisible.
You might practice action narration for a month and feel like your conversational speed hasn't changed at all.
Right. But biologically, things are shifting under the surface. The myelin is thickening.
It's compounding.
Absolutely. There is an invisible compounding effect to this kind of practice. Every single short sentence you speak in your head, every single podcast you absorb, every time you successfully bypass your native language to label a messy desk, you are building neurological experience.
Rep by rep.
Rep by rep. You are slowly shifting the cognitive load from the prefrontal cortex, which handles conscious, effortful thought, to the basal ganglia, which manages automatic habits and reflexes.
And then what?
And then the ultimate payoff happens. The shift completes.
The day it suddenly just happens automatically. You don't force it. It just arrives.
Yes. You will be in a conversation, and suddenly you realize you are understanding a fast-paced sentence without translating a single word.
It was click.
You realize you just answered a question instantly without the internal buffering. The translation bottleneck simply disappears, and the language finally feels natural.
You shift from conscious competence to unconscious competence.
Exactly.
It's the ultimate aha moment. I think the best way to describe it is like when you are learning to ride a bike.
Oh, perfect analogy.
Right. When you start, you are wobbly. You are consciously thinking about your balance, your pedaling, the angle of the handlebars, your speed. It requires 100% of your mental energy to just stay upright.
You're overthinking every movement.
Yes. And then, one day, you are pedaling down the street, and suddenly you realize you've been balancing on your own for the last 3 blocks.
And you didn't even notice.
You are just riding. You stopped thinking about the mechanics of how to ride, and you just started writing. That is exactly what happens with language. You stop thinking about how to speak English, and you just start speaking.
And that moment is entirely achievable for anyone listening, provided they put in those daily 5 minutes of direct thought practice and stop relying on the translation mapping.
So let's distill this down for you, the listener. What is the absolute core takeaway from everything we've unpacked today? It's a simple mandate. Stop translating. Start thinking.
You have to actively choose to bypass your native language.
And you do that by beginning with the smallest possible thoughts. Don't try to be a philosopher. Just be a narrator of your immediate physical reality.
Use short sentences to relieve cognitive pressure. Practice for just 5 minutes every day to signal to your brain that this is important.
And above all, lower that affective filter. Let go of the need to be perfect. Communication is about human connection, not flawless grammar.
Let the momentum carry you.
Let it carry you. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. Something to explore on your own as you start this journey of rewiring your brain.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
If you actually succeed, if you successfully cut out your native language entirely and learn to think directly, fluidly, and instantly in English, does your inner voice change?
Oh, wow, that touches on linguistic relativity.
Exactly. When you stop translating and start thinking in a completely different language structure, with its own unique rhythms, its own idioms, and its own cultural baggage, do you actually become a slightly different version of yourself?
That is a fascinating question to leave them with.
Pay attention to that as you practice. Notice how your personality, your sense of humor, or your confidence might shift as you reach this new level of fluency. Maybe that buffering video we talked about at the beginning isn't just loading English vocabulary. Maybe it's loading a whole new you.
I love that.
Keep practicing. Keep thinking directly, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.